In StratNews Global's Eastern Front AirPower series, today we're in Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh, and our guest, or rather our host should I say, is Air Marshal S.P. Dharkar. He's the Air Officer, Commanding-in-Chief of the Eastern Air Command. Air Marshal, first of all, it's been a while that we've been planning this. So glad to finally be here with you, sir.
It's a pleasure to have this
Pleasure is
opportunity.
all ours, sir. You can start with an overall kind of overview for our viewers, sir. In terms of the Eastern Air Command's area of responsibility, now it's a vast expanse. There are several countries, borders that you look at. If you can elucidate for our viewers the expansiveness of your AR.
You know, as compared to most of the other commands in India, this is quite a different one. We are the only command with 5 neighbors. So you start with Nepal.
Yep.
You have China, Bhutan, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. And in addition to that, if you just look at how we are in terms of internally, we span 12 states.
Yep.
So you have all the northeastern states, plus the states of West Bengal, Bihar. We have a little portion in Jharkhand, and a very small portion in Orissa.
Yep.
So in that manner, yes, the terrain goes all the way from sea level in West Bengal to heights at Tawang and beyond, even higher when you look at the Sikkim zone.
Sure.
And it's a very daunting terrain. You can look around you. It's wooded in a large segment. Thankfully, the only thing we miss is a desert. But you have the Brahmaputra plains in the center, and you have the Himalayan ranges to the north and the Arakan Peninsula on the other side. It's an interesting place to be.
On this very trip, sir, we've had the fortune again this time to travel to Air Force Station Hasimara. We saw the pride of place in your inventory, the the Rafales.
Oh, we are as proud of the rest of them too?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm not trying to suggest that at all.
No.
But their induction, Air Marshal, that's undoubtedly changed the dynamics in the area.
While this gets pointed out fairly frequently, one practical part about this is that irrespective of where you would base an asset, air power being dynamic and flexible the way it is, you could have them relocated to any other portion in almost the blink of an eye. Which means then that their presence here does add to a punch, but it adds to a punch as national capability, and they could be very well positioned anywhere else and would have been probably just as good. But yes, of course, they have pride of place both in our mind and in our operational dynamic. Yes, it's true.
And if you can, to whatever extent, without giving out any operational details that are not necessary, outline for us why the Rafale is a game changer. It's game-changing capabilities.
Okay. The Rafale brings to the table some capabilities that we were managing to do by innovation earlier. But the aircraft has it as part of its intrinsic design. It's, of course, a 4.5 generation aircraft, so to say. And there are only a limited number of 5th generation aircraft around there in operational use at the moment. So in that very term, it's probably one of the very latest that the world has to offer. When you look at the nature of punch that it provides, whether it's in terms of its basic armament capabilities, whether it is in terms of its data link and capabilities, whether it's in terms of its data fusion that it's capable of, and the host of roles and tasks that it can perform in a single mission. That's what it brings to the table. And so everything from electronic warfare to long-range capability to exceptional precision strike. It's a beautiful aircraft to have.
And in the ACES, so we've done a little bit, in terms of infrastructure development. We looked at both civil and military security angles. Some of them are, dual capabilities as well. But in the EAC, if you can outline the kind of infrastructure development that's taken place at your air bases and your ALGs.
We're standing at an ALG in itself right now. And of course, if you look around you in terms of the terrain here, to find a reasonable strip of land where you can have a longish ALG is a challenge. And so helicopters, provide a significant capability in this kind of a region. Add to that the fact that development in this portion has been a little behind the rest of the country. And so when you look at road connectivity, the very fact that, if you look in that direction, that's what comes in from the Sela Pass there. Yep. And till not too long ago, that was one of the only axes that we had in order to come here. And of course, now, given the impetus to development and infrastructure build-up in the Northeast, we are finding that there is more and more build-up that's taking place here. When you look at how it will affect us, how it affects our operations today, and the capabilities that it's going to provide us a little into the future, infrastructure development is critical to all this. Like you correctly pointed out, it's not necessarily civilian infrastructure, it's not military infrastructure, it's infrastructure. Yep. Roads connect everybody. I mean, nobody decides that, only the military will use the road, or conversely that the military will not use the road. Its availability would provide lots of avenues for development. Yep. For some basic things like, providing the locals adequate means of transportation, communication, the ability to improve educational facilities here, to use the ability of this location for tourism. And all that is going to provide significant fillip. What it provides us in the military, of course, is that much easier access, that much easier capability to put feet on ground wherever we need to. And of course, infrastructure development helps. In terms of what the Air Force is doing specifically, we are in the process of strengthening this kind of infrastructure. The ability to both get men and material here, to house them here for some time, to store some things here as when required, so that the transit time in the event of a requirement reduces to the absolute minimum. And that's what we look for.
And get the criticality in terms of your development of ALGs, if you could elaborate on that. And if I can add a second one there, are the ALGs capable of operating your medium altitude, long endurance UAVs as well?
Without a doubt. In fact, thankfully, the way most of these UAVs go today, their requirements in terms of ground infrastructure is fairly small. Okay. The footprint they really have on ground is very manageable. Many of our ALGs can take that, even today. Right. And when you look at how this matches up with other national initiatives, whether it is, the building of more and more greenfield airfields, when you look at an airfield or a heliport of this nature, like the very one we are standing on, the possibilities are boundless. Mm-hmm. Once we end up in a situation wherein we have the asset and we now imaginatively use it for whatever we require, then UAVs is just one part. But even otherwise, even for the ability to ferry in and take away people from here, whether it is for tourism or whether it is for HADR, increases by significant means and bounds.
Understood. And you've been pointing out the areas here, and I'd like the viewers to be able to get as much as possible of a view. So if we could, just take a small break and move to a location closer to the chopper, and also give them the backdrop of the magnificent Tawang Monastery. That would be perfect.
Why not? Let's do that.
Thanks. Hey Marshal, now we have the Tawang Monastery in the background of one of our cameras, and again we're closer to one of your transport assets. So just wanted to ask you a little bit more in depth about their role in terms of support to the critical support to the Indian Army in this region, and the synergy that both of you have.
You mentioned a little time ago about the pace of development of infrastructure here, and how it has been a little behind the rest of the country. Given the terrain here, given the vagaries of weather, which was something that we didn't quite touch about, helicopters and transport aircraft are almost the lifeline for a large number of our troops that are stationed close to our borders at some really daunting heights. And with every passing day, we are actually doing more and more in terms of providing them both material as well as basic support. Just the presence of the helicopter, or the ability to take a person out of somewhere where he needs to quickly go out of, is quite a morale booster. And in terms of provisioning, this is a critical capability. And we are not only utilizing what we have, but we are also making more and more inroads into building this capability. You would be of course aware, and so would your listeners and viewers, about the Chinooks that we've also incorporated now into into the overall operational capability that we have here. And they bring a very significant heli-lift capability here, which is wonderful.
You said we hadn't mentioned it, so let's talk about that in a little depth. In terms of difficulties, whether it's combat operations or preparations or training or support roles that you have in this kind of terrain, in this very terrain, altitudes, hilly, jungles.
Finally, actually, nothing counts as much as experience does. And no matter how much you train, terrain, weather is going to throw challenges to you that you actually are going to find different from whatever you prepared for. So it's our endeavor to have as many of our aircrew exposed to as much of this particular region as we can. A lot of that training gets interspersed with practical operational utilization. And so it is something that we do almost 24/7, 365.
If you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, Marshal, in terms of training, you have a wide spread of assets under your wings. And how do you go about it? And how beneficial is it that you have such varied atmospheres and environments?
Practical training, like I said, provides that experience. And in that manner, I think we are blessed. We get lovely seasons. Starting, as we are seeing now, we are approaching the end of the monsoon. The monsoons themselves are significant in this part of the world, whether you look what happens here in terms of both clouding as well as rainfall, or south of the Brahmaputra Valley at Shillong, where our headquarters is. We are a stone's throw from Cherrapunji, which was the wettest place not too long ago. Of course, it just handed over to Mawsynram, which is also quite there. Now we hope in the coming months, before the snows really set in, we'd have a spell of weather of this nature, when you have the opportunity to aviate into these zones with some amount of more confidence and some amount of more opportunity. And when you go on to the summer thereafter, the pre-monsoons start here about end April to early May, and that takes us back to the monsoon. But this is good season to train, to indoctrinate our people into operating here. And temperatures at these heights tend to be facilitative of being able to really operate in the manner that we want to. It helps. At the same time, given the fact that we have a number of airfields at lower altitudes here, we do manage to put in quite a bit of training, and we make use of every method to actually improve that particular capability, so that when we actually were to require to use them operationally, we wouldn't be found wanting. We have inducted a number of simulators. We do a lot of hands-on training, and we also help doing that for people who are expected to come in here in the case of an operational requirement by periodic exercises and the like. So we do manage a significant bit.
And all those assets that you're talking about, assets in terms of various angles of training, the area, the experience it gives, what is it that draws foreign air forces to you for training as well?
You're probably referring to what we do in some of our more western air bases in our AOR. The advantage of this part of the country is that, and especially where we host some of these are, that they do not enjoy this kind of terrain.
Yeah.
They don't enjoy this kind of airspace. And we do make great use of a large expanse of airspace, which allows them to do much more than they were to be doing wherever else they train. I mean, it's also the fact that it provides an outreach for us at the national level. It allows us to mingle with air forces and capable air forces across the rest of the world. and it provides each other that much more opportunity. They come here to learn about how to operate in terrain like this. Where else in the world do you have hills and mountains of this nature? At the same time, where else can you get airborne in a single sortie and operate in mountainous terrain or go and operate over the seas? And that's something that some of our air bases allow us to do. All in all, I think it's a very mutually beneficial relationship, wherein we get to see some practices that we learn from. They enjoy having this kind of freedom in airspace utilization, which allows us to, especially for modern aircraft, allows us to train in manners which otherwise would have been resource restricted if done in a smaller zone. And so it helps.
Understood. You touched upon it a little bit earlier, Marshal, but if you want to elaborate a little bit more on what kind of full mission simulators do you have here and what kind of upgrades are you looking at?
Simulators provide three major advantages over aircraft. One, of course, they are easier and cheaper to operate. The second is that you can operate them full time without really leading to fatigue or maintenance requirements of similar nature as aircraft. And thirdly, it helps us to conserve that resource for when we need it in terms of the nature of training that we can do. You can crash a simulator, but then the crew will just put it back online. That's not quite the same that you could do with an actual asset. And so you can train actually to the edges of the envelope, which helps. In terms of capabilities, simulators are getting more and more capable with computing that is getting more and more capable as well. And so you have simulators that you can walk out of actually sweating, believing that you've gone the full envelope. And whereas you could have been simply sitting in an air-conditioned room, but the realism is so close that you actually get out of there feeling that you've done it all. And it's only improving day by day. In fact, simulators these days are becoming almost as good as armchair simulators, when you could just sit in a seat that matches the one in the aircraft, and everything around you is virtual. And in just about maybe 2-3 minutes time, you become one into that whole environment, and you actually cannot make out the difference. That is what modern simulation is providing. As regards military simulation, it can allow you to fly to places that you don't really need to go to. It allows you to go through missions and mission sets that otherwise would have been both expensive and somewhat both challenging or probably impinging on safety. You could feel that somebody is actually shooting at you without somebody being actually shooting at you. And it has multiple benefits. So we are looking forward to inducting simulators. We've inducted a fair number of them already. In fact, the Rafales came with their own. We have a very capable MLH, or a medium lift helicopter simulator, that's at one of our bases. The Su-30s have their own simulation. And all in all, the simulators allow you to take training to an entirely different level. It's a wonderful thing to have.
If you want to talk about the Air Force, when an ordinary common person looks at it, it's up there in terms of prestige, but there is a distance. Let me finish. What I'm trying to say is, say something like your operations on HADRs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when a common person sees the effect, even one person needs to be evacuated, life-threatening from various areas. If you could talk about how crucial that is an aspect of making the Air Force, I don't mean more accessible. You know what I'm trying to say in terms of connection with
more
a common person.
Okay, that's an interesting question. Since you spoke about infrastructure and the nature of this entire landmass here, it is prone to vagaries of weather. It is prone to things like landslides. There are times when there are a significant number of times when you have floods in the Brahmaputra plains. And heli-lift provides you some kind of ability to reach places where otherwise it would have been so difficult to reach. It allows you to evacuate people from places where they couldn't otherwise have been able to get out of. Transport aircraft provide you the ability to take large amounts of material quickly to a location and provide, a really life-changing opportunity. And we do a large amount of this in this particular region. You would have seen things like, like a ropeway rescue, wherein people were lifted out of a stranded cable car. And this is some things that an Air Force can provide, which otherwise the others would find relatively difficult to match. As regards connect, not too long ago, and even to some extent even today, there are places in Arunachal Pradesh here which are connected largely by air. Absolutely. And we do transport men and material out of there frequently, almost on a daily basis, for even the civilian administration there, or even regular villagers there who make use of such abilities. And of course, two things are happening. One, the amount of aviation assets across the nation, including civilian aviation assets, are increasing. The number of places that are getting connected by the airlines is increasing. The Udan scheme is also reaching in these locations now. And while the Air Force footprint in this would or may reduce as a result slightly, fact remains that many of these things take place from places which the Air Force owns and operates. So they would operate out of the same airfields, joint user airfields once in a while, or they would operate where we have air traffic services facilities, where we provide weather, forecasting and such. And so that connect is there, and I guess it will only increase.
If you could now just join all the dots in our conversation and your position as well, what would you, highlight as your chief priorities as the AOC-in-C of the Eastern Air Command that you have already performed and need to do?
That would be
another full interview, is it?
Probably, but I'll try and keep it short. Okay, chief priorities would be fourfold. I know 3 sounds like a better number, but I would believe they're fourfold. One is to ensure that we have the assets that we have and we look after them adequately well so as to be able to utilize them when that time of reckoning comes. Two, to train both our air crew, ground crew, support services and all in a nicely collaborative manner so that we function adequately well together. 3, to do this alongside the other services whom we operate with, because finally that's where we are today and that's where we ought to be into the future. Which means then that we need to be together, joint, looking forward to be integrated as we move along. And the 4th is to find more and more means, mechanisms and ways to do this in more economical manner, to do this with greater efficiency, and to assist some of the initiatives that we are doing at the national level while we go at it, whether it is in terms of outreach, whether it is in terms of making assets available to be used in the national level for everybody, including whether it's just for the military or for civilian use as well. To do it alongside in furthering national causes with whatever we do with our neighbors, whether it is in terms of providing them the asset base to work with or just ensuring surveillance from time to time. And all in all, to work in every manner possible to help that national aim and goal.
National aim and goal, and the Air Force's experience institutional experience that it's learned over the decades, how the world is changing. Warfare is changing, security threats are changing, and it doesn't have to be something very high tech. But there also is several elements of high tech that have to be involved. The future, Marshal, how are you
would agree
gearing up for that?
there's no runner-up in a conflict, and so you have no choice but to keep pace with whatever is happening around you, look a little further into the distant future and also prepare as well as participate in what's likely to come, and whether that is in terms of technology, whether it is in terms of TTP, whether it is in terms of practices that you need to incorporate, whether it is in the nature of interactions that you need to do. And all in all, whether it is in terms of understanding the whole DIME model so as to be participative wherever you can be. And that goes across the entire spectrum of everything we do. technology, there used to be a time earlier when cutting-edge technology used to first find its way into the military and then evolve thereafter for more prolific use. That metric, in my opinion, is changing a little, wherein now you find cutting-edge technology also entering the civilian domain almost at the same time, and sometimes even earlier, as when we get it into the military. It comes with it, it brings with it a large amount of cost and suitable planning, the ability to do or to be interactive in research and development, to be participative in terms of industry participation. And when you look at all that, and you look at the nature of adversarial developments that you see in the neighborhood, as also changing dynamics of what goes on here. I'd mentioned we have 5 neighbors, and we've seen very recently what happened in the neighborhood. And it's a continuing challenge. How we would aim to prepare for it is to be alive to the situation, is to be interacting internally with all means of government within the country to work towards it, furthering our government's intentions in terms of outreach, and being adequately collaborative with everybody around so as to maximize what we can get for, to make it the best bang for the buck.
And it's not just future, it's already here, I mean, in many parts. Would love to have your thoughts, Air Marshal, on India's space doctrine.
As regards what is possible at space, it's that boundary which everybody aspires to break. And frankly, despite our small footprint in space, I guess ISRO has been doing wonderfully across the years in order to put us also in that portion of the sky. Have we been utilizing it adequately in military terms? I'd like to say that in yes and no. Because finally, no matter what, space assets are expensive. They're cutting-edge technology. And frankly, it is rocket science. And while we've been doing well, I guess a little more interaction between the civilian portion and the military portion would see us make significantly better strides in space. We are everywhere where anybody else in the world is. I mean, other than Voyager, which has left the solar system, we went around Mars. We collaborate with the best in the world at the national level, I'm referring to. In everything we are at cutting edge technology in terms of exploration or research on the sun. We've sent stuff to the moon earlier. Chandrayaan was an immensely successful program. And the best part that in typical Indian style, we did it cheaper than everybody else did. So yes, we have the brains behind it. Yes, we have the willingness. And we are building the wherewithal. What would we do in order to improve our own capabilities in terms of military capability? Let's not look at it as merely military capability. Let's look at dual use capabilities. Because the same sensor that can do imaging across an adversary can also help you do everything starting from civic development to water management to let's say geological research in where we need it on our own landmass. And so it's a technology that only requires innovation to utilize to its most effective means. And in that regard, I guess the new initiatives that this government is taking on space will help us both in the civilian domain as well as in terms of our military ambitions and capabilities in order to providing us that much more security footprint.
Hey, Marshal Dharkar, again want to thank you so much, sir, for being such gracious hosts and giving us this opportunity.
No, it was indeed a pleasure, and it's always fun to interact in this manner, especially at such lovely locations. I'm sure you enjoyed being here too. And so
absolutely second that, the whole of our team, and I'm sure many of our viewers would be quite jealous of the fact that we are here.
Maybe it will help more and more people come to Tawang.
What better?
Thank you so very
advertisement.
much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Privilege is ours. And for all our viewers, do send us feedback on this interview that's coming to you from the field. You can follow all our social media handles for the latest articles that we put up or interviews like this with Air Marshal S.P. Dharkar on our YouTube site. This is Amitabh Revi in Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh for StratNews Global.